Open your cerebral cortex and shift your lobes into upper beta phase, because you are going to have Bitcoin knowledge transmitted directly into your vestibulocochlear. Your host at Bitcoin Knowledge is Trace Mayer, an early Bitcoin advocate since it cost $0.25, but this is not intended to be investment advice. A doctor of jurisprudence, but this is definitely not legal advice. And an investor in core cryptocurrency infrastructure, including Armory, BitPay, Kraken, and Mitagio, but this is not a recommendation of those services. Here, you get fed via direct mind download with pure and free Bitcoin knowledge.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast. We have with us the legendary Jesse Powell, CEO of Kraken. Welcome to the podcast, Jesse.
Hey, thanks, Trace. Good to be back.
Yeah, so Kraken's, coming up on 5 years. 5 years old now. What's with that? That's eternal in Bitcoin.
Yeah, just about 5 years. Many altcoin lifetimes. It's been a rough ride. It's been a good ride. You know, we're in it for the long haul, and hopefully we're still here in another 5 years.
Yeah, so the exchange actually went live, 2013, and Kraken's now, you guys are the largest exchange or second largest exchange in terms of volume now?
Yeah, second largest exchange in terms of volume.
In the world. Yeah.
In the world, yeah. We've come up a long way in the last couple months.
Well, what's the road? Like, how'd you guys get there? You know, you started trading in 2013, but company's 2011. Yep. Maybe a war story or two about this?
Yeah, so we'd actually been working on the exchange for a long time before we launched it. We thought, as a professional financial services company, we needed to get things right the first time. We didn't want a repeat of Mt. Gox. And, you know, a lot of our inspiration for creating the exchange was to do things better than Mt. Gox.
We going to get our Mt. Gox coins anytime soon?
You know, the trustee is making progress. We're still occasionally assisting with that, but it's pretty much in their hands now. They're reviewing all the claims. Unfortunately, there are a lot of claims, and anytime there was a discrepancy in any of the claims, the person needs to be contacted and it needs to be resolved. Yeah. And you know, there are tens of thousands of claimants.
Wasn't there like $20 billion claimed or something absurd?
Right. So yeah, I mean, the question is like maybe some people are just trolling and they entered that they lost $1 billion. Maybe there's some typos or some currency exchange rate issues.
So it's out of your hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's out of our hands. They just kind of got to go through person by person, and any discrepancy has to be addressed one at a time, and it's not until they've resolved all of those that they'll be able to pay anybody back. So fingers crossed that'll get done later this year. But, you know, it's really out of our hands at this point, and the trustee hasn't committed to any specific date.
Yeah, so I guess back before I interrupted you, so kind of the war story, you know?
Yeah, so, I mean, before the exchange, you know, we had some other stuff going on early in 2011. We did a lot of mining. We had a mining pool called Max BTC. I think it was the first mining pool to use Manny Rosenfeld's double geometric method of distribution, which I think was the fairest method at the time. Unfortunately, that was not really appreciated by most people. I think it was maybe a little complicated to understand. But
that would be many.
Yeah. But we did a lot of mining ourselves. You know, at one point we had more than 5% of the network. So early on in 2011, when Bitcoin was $1, you know, I did the math, and I was already totally sold on Bitcoin. You know, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put a bunch of money into Bitcoin, and I did the math on whether I should buy Bitcoin at $1 or buy mining equipment. And
you know, this sounds like a familiar
the classic
story.
Blunder, yeah. So
you and Bitfury and Antminer and
yeah, right. So you can probably imagine what happened. You know, I order $100,000 worth of mining equipment, and you know, 6 months later it shows up, and by that time Bitcoin is like $30 a coin, and I sort of like missed my opportunity to 30x my money. But we start on mining anyway, and It's just like a giant headache, a giant operational headache. I mean, this is GPU mining back at the time.
Oh, they're very needy. They're like golden retrievers.
Yeah. So it's like constantly, attending to the miners. Each GPU kind of has its own tolerances, and systems would just shut off, and you have to go manually reboot them, and this kind of stuff. And even just finding a location with cheap power and with available power. I mean, these things just ate up tons of power. Was really difficult to do. And so operationally, there was a lot of overhead. And, after mining a few thousand coin, we just wanted to get out of the business, and really regretted not just buying Bitcoin. So we ended up selling all those mining rigs to a guy who had really cheap power in Washington. He was getting like 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour. And so we sold off the operation, but we kept the mining pool running for a little while, but it wasn't really getting much traction. I mean, it was doing okay. We had merged mining with Namecoin, but it wasn't like the business that we wanted to be in. And at the time, I thought that a decentralized pool like P2 Pool would ultimately win out, and I didn't really feel like mining should be that centralized anyway. And so we decided to just focus our attention completely on the exchange at that point, and that's really when we started in earnest building out Kraken. And it took a good year and a half to really get it to the point where we felt like it was ready to give to the public.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have just been crushing it lately. More war stories, right? Like,
yeah.
What's happened over the last couple months?
Definitely. I mean, it's kind of like the perfect storm of stuff thrown on us. A lot of things have happened that have increased our volume and our activity. 2015 was a really rough year for Bitcoin. The price was hovering around $200. Obviously, as an exchange, we're dependent upon really price and volatility or volume. And if those things are low, we're not making much money. And I think it hurt the whole ecosystem as a whole, just the price being where it was and the interest being where it was. So we were really lean throughout 2015 and coming into 2016. But a lot of things happened at the beginning of the year that really drove a lot of new interest and a lot of activity at Kraken. And these things are our Coinsetter and Sea Vertex acquisitions. We acquired around 70,000 clients there.
Oh my goodness!
Through that, obviously not all active, but a good chunk of those were active, and we had to work on migrating all these users from those platforms onto Kraken. We also had.
And you opened a bunch of new U.S. states with Coinsetter, right? Plus Canada. I mean, that's
right.
a lot. That's just a lot of work.
Right. So, greatly expanded our Canadian presence and opened up 30-plus states in the United States. So that was a ton of new users, not just the users we got from Coinsetter, but we had something like 40,000 U.S. users that had signed up on Kraken at some point in the last several years that were just sitting, kind of waiting for us to turn them on.
Yeah.
And so we finally did, and that was like a huge rush of people coming in. We also announced the Series B lead from SBI, who's a large Japanese financial conglomerate. That got a lot of press. The Mt. Gox update got a lot of press. But the largest story, obviously, is Ether.
Okay, what's that?
I probably don't need to tell you, but Ether is another coin. It's been in development for quite a while, but it launched in August, I believe, but really started to pick up a lot of traction in January. And the price opened at around $2.50 back in August. I think the pre-sale was around 25 cents per coin.
Oh wow!
Then it opened at around $2.50, which was great. Everyone was happy with 10x returns. But then it dropped down to about 60 cents, and since then has come back up to I think it touched $15 the other day. So obviously, like, huge spike in growth there.
Volatility, cha-ching.
Tons of volatility, tons of new interest, tons of people who felt like they missed the first Bitcoin wave, who saw Ether as sort of a second opportunity, and maybe Ether or Ethereum as sort of the 2.0, the Facebook that's going to replace the MySpace that is Bitcoin. So there's a lot of hype around Ether, and
is it just hype?
It's not all hype. No,
there's some substance.
There's definitely some substance there.
Of course, I mean, you trade it, right?
Yeah, we're very selective about the coins that we offer.
Dogecoin?
Dogecoin, there was a lot of hype around Dogecoin at one time too, and it had a very strong community around it. Today, not so much.
But like Namecoin, for example, you did lots of technical due diligence on that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can go into that a little bit.
We did, yeah. We did find a critical flaw in Namecoin, and we reported it, and fortunately, it got patched. But since Namecoin hasn't really gained the traction, unfortunately.
But still, like, how about Ether? I mean, have you kind of dug into the protocol there? Found any problems?
Yeah, no, we haven't found any issues with Ether. I mean, a lot of it though is very new stuff, and very complicated, and things are still evolving, like the way that mining or coin generation works, consensus works, for example, is still potentially going to change to a proof of stake mechanism away from mining. So there's things still evolving with Ether. We haven't ourselves found any critical issues with it. We again did a lot of diligence before we launched it.
How many Ether are there going to be?
Unknown.
Oh,
so,
it's unknown.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It sort of depends on what happens with mining, whether it eventually converts into a proof of stake or mining just continues on forever.
And so it could have an infinite supply, is what you're saying.
I'm not, again, this is still evolving, so I guess theoretically it could be infinite. I don't believe that there's a cap.
So it's
right
not.
now.
So it's not like Bitcoin, where supposedly there's this 21 million cap. I mean, it's not like we have kind of this hard limit set on the number of Ether. It's
right.
It's still an Ether.
So far, yeah, there's no hard limit on the number of Ether.
Why do you think people are speculating on it so much then?
Well, I think that if it does switch to proof of stake, then there definitely is like a finite amount of it. But I think a lot of the speculation is around just how it will be used. Like, there are a lot of huge companies that are talking about doing stuff with Ether, like Microsoft, for example, IBM, are both using Ether in some capacity, and so that, I think that sort of recommendation is very strong, and there are a lot of cool things like Slockit.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
I interviewed Christoph, actually, who
Awesome.
for the podcast. Yeah.
Great. Cool. Yeah, so that's like a really cool project. I mean, people are doing really cool things. I mean, there's consensus. There are a lot of cool projects being built on Ether, and it's doing a lot of things that Bitcoin hasn't been able to do. On top of that, we've got this sort of divergence in the Bitcoin community about which way Bitcoin's going. I mean, I think there's a lot of uncertainty around that that's costing a lot of confidence that people had in Bitcoin.
So when do I get to sell my classic coins on Kraken?
As soon as people are asking to trade classic coins, we're always happy to list more altcoins. We've got a long history of listing altcoins, and we wouldn't have a problem listing classic coins or diet coins or any other sort of soda-based coins that
Flavor du jour.
that come up. We'll see what happens with that. These days we are much more of an Ether exchange than we are a Bitcoin exchange.
Just based on volume.
Based on volume,
Wow,
yeah.
but it's the Ether Bitcoin pair, so
Right, that's true. So Bitcoin's obviously key there, and I think that.
Well, I mean, are you trying to say that Ether's going to evolve into the store of value, or could we actually have multiple successful cryptocurrency coins out there filling different use cases.
We can have multiple successful coins filling different use cases, and depending upon what happens with Bitcoin may be the store of value use case, and maybe Ether's the transactional payments coin,
even with something like Lightning Network on the horizon.
Yeah, Lightning Network will definitely improve things. It's not out yet, so we'll see what happens. There are obviously things that can happen with Bitcoin that can improve the situation, and I hope that those things happen. What Bitcoin really has going for it is its entrenchment, the brand recognition. It's got all the on and off ramps. It's got the bridges to fiat that Ether doesn't have, which I think is why you'll see that the Ether Bitcoin markets are so much larger than the fiat Ether markets. It's just so much easier for people to get into Bitcoin. Like you can go anywhere and buy Bitcoin. There's a local bitcoins.com. As far as I know, there's not a local ether.com. So there's so many more ramps in and out of Bitcoin. And so if nothing else, Bitcoin may survive as this sort of entry point into other cryptos.
What do you kind of see your role as in this industry then? If we've got lots of controversial things like this block size debate and how hard forks could happen. What's the role of the exchange in all of this?
Yeah, I've got my personal opinions, of course, but the exchange.
I'm much more interested in the exchange than.
Yeah, so the exchange itself, we try to be neutral. We're trying to be sort of the Switzerland of businesses.
More volume that way.
Yeah, right. Why pick a side? We want to support everything. We're in the business of making money, not choosing ideologies. And so if people want to trade a coin, we want to support it. And, it doesn't really matter to us, what the underlying movement is behind it, so long as there's interest there.
Yeah, and enough paying customers.
Yeah, exactly.
What do customers want? How do customers kind of get new things added to Kraken or new features? Should we talk about it in Twitter threads?
Yeah, if you got a comments thread on this podcast, that would be a good way to submit a suggestion, or tweet us on Twitter at KrakenFX, or submit a support ticket with a suggestion. We keep track of all of the suggestions and we score them, and it does help us to determine how to prioritize things internally.
Well, we've had a wonderful interview with the legendary Jesse Powell of Kraken. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks again, Trace. Always good.
Be sure to get a copy of the free Bitcoin Guide at freebitcoinguide.com. Got a question or suggestion? Record your voice at bitcoin.kn. Don't be shy. To help the show, share bitcoin.kn with friends, post about it on Reddit, and otherwise spam the interwebs. Your iTunes comments and 5-star reviews are very important to us. Please continue tuning in to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, where we release interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. Now take some choline and let that Bitcoin knowledge consolidate.